President Biden marked his first Veterans Day as president with a wreath laying at Arlington National Cemetery and the promise of an initiative to examine the link between toxic exposures and illnesses among men and women who have served. Speaking at the ceremony, Biden offered this pledge.
I want you to know our administration is going to meet this sacred obligation that we owe you. We're going to work with Congress, Republicans, and Democrats together to make sure our veterans receive the world-class benefits that they've earned, meet the sacred, the specific care, specific needs that they each individually need.
In the United Kingdom and in Europe, the field of World War I, leaders marked the 1918 end of the war to end all wars. Millions were lost in battle. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said today that after 2 weeks of global summit talks about climate change and carbon emissions, the planet's environmental future remains in doubt. He expressed concern that goals to slow down global warming may not be achieved. But U.S. climate envoy John Kerry says he's feeling hopeful going forward. NPR's Ari Shapiro reports.
In an interview here at COP26, Secretary John Kerry told me he won't be able to give a verdict on the summit until he sees the final text of the agreement, which will likely come out late tonight. But he pointed to a number of accomplishments over the last 2 weeks to argue that in many ways the gathering has already been a success.
Everybody can look at this and say, oh, the glass is half empty, or you can look at it and see the glass half full. I see it half full coming out of here.
The commitments made here in Scotland do not come close to keeping the global temperature increase below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But Secretary Kerry insists the decade ahead will be one in which countries dramatically shrink their carbon emissions. Ari Shapiro, NPR News, Glasgow.
South Africa's last apartheid-era president, F.W. de Klerk, has died at his home in Cape Town. He had cancer. NPR's Ada Peralta reports.
By the time F.W. de Klerk decided to release Nelson Mandela from prison, South Africa had become a global pariah. The country was facing sanctions and a tainted reputation abroad. So de Klerk relented after spending a career defending a white supremacist system that dehumanized black South Africans. He decided it was time to end it. De Klerk decriminalized the African National Congress, South Africa's liberation party. He shared a Nobel Peace Prize with Mandela, and in 1994 he lost the presidential race to Mandela. But de Klerk's legacy is complicated. Just a few years ago, he refused to call apartheid a crime against humanity. De Klerk was 85 years old. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Cape Town.
Wall Street, the Dow is down 97, the Nasdaq up 118. This is NPR.
Kyle Rittenhouse testified for the first time at his criminal trial in Kenosha, Wisconsin yesterday. Rittenhouse, 18 years old, says he feared for his life when he shot 3 men during a night of anti-police protests last summer. 2 of the men were killed, a third was wounded. Chuck Pornbach of member station WUWM has been following the trial. He joins us now. Chuck, thanks for being here. Kyle Rittenhouse, as we noted, was on the stand for most of the day yesterday. Can you describe what defense attorneys were trying to convey?
Well, throughout the trial, they really tried to paint a picture of a young man. He was 17 at the time of the shootings, who was a good guy, caught up in bad circumstances. On the stand, Rittenhouse talked about his work in the fields that focus on helping people. He was a lifeguard both in Illinois and in Wisconsin, just outside Kenosha. He carried a medical bag that night. He was trained in CPR and had been part of a youth trainee program, EMT cadet program in the fire department where he lived in Antioch, Illinois.
So that's his background, but most of the questioning focused on the events that led up to the shooting, right? What did he say about that?
Right. When being questioned by one of his attorneys, Rittenhouse talked about meeting up with other civilians, many of them armed, to help protect buildings the night of the shootings, particularly protect used car lots that had been damaged previous nights during the protests. After law enforcement forced protesters away from where Rittenhouse was stationed, he and another armed man went back among the protesters. Rittenhouse said to offer more medical aid. The two became separated as he was walking to another car lot where there was a report of a fire. Rittenhouse encountered Joseph Rosenbaum. He said Rosenbaum began yelling at him, chasing him. Rittenhouse said he feared for his life during the encounters with Rosenbaum. And the other men he later shot, Anthony Huber and Gage Grosskreutz. Rosenbaum and Huber died. Grosskreutz was wounded.
So Rittenhouse was there as sort of a vigilante. mean, he says he was there just to protect buildings and property during the protests. How did prosecutors challenge that?
Well, Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger really tried to pick apart Rittenhouse's intent that night. Binger focused on the AR-15 rifle Rittenhouse used in the shootings, how it was purchased for Rittenhouse by his friend because Rittenhouse couldn't legally buy it on his own in Wisconsin. Binger also focused on Rittenhouse's actions leading up to the shootings, saying it was the defendant, not the men he shot, who posed a threat. Rittenhouse became emotional when Binger wanted to know more about when being chased by Rosenbaum, why Rittenhouse turned around and pointed his gun at the man.
Why'd you point it at him if you didn't have any intention of shooting?
He was chasing me. I was alone. He threatened to kill me earlier that night. I didn't want to have to shoot him.
Rittenhouse's testimony ended in late afternoon. The defense's case is expected to resume this morning. Testimony from the video expert is likely to talk about some of the footage we've seen during the trial.
We should mention the family of Jacob Black Jr., who was the black man who was shot and murdered by police last August. It was his shooting that catalyzed the protest in Kenosha. Some of his family gathered last night, I understand.
Right, about 30 people held a pretty large and some smoke cover outside of the work. These reports were there. One of the speakers was Jacob Blake's uncle, Justin. Blake was been outside the courthouse for the entire trial. Blake said that the matters to show support for the men who died of the morning.
Chuck, my conversation to thank you.
Thank you.
There is a classic rule in advertising. Don't talk about the competition. Focus on your own brand. Don't give anybody else any free publicity. But new research shows that praising your competitors might actually be good for business. I'm Stacey Bannick-Smith, TAC News.
In this NPR podcast, the following message comes from Klaviyo, the email and text marketing platform built to keep customers coming back. Creators communicate with Klaviyo. Get started for free at klaviyo.com/NPR.
A federal judge has blocked an order by the Texas governor that banned mask mandates in public schools. The judge said the governor's order puts children with disabilities at risk. NPR's John Burnett has the story.
Plaintiffs in this case are 7 disabled children, 12 years and under, who are particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. Federal Judge Viofo A119 ruled that banning masks in Texas schools violates the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and he issued a permanent injunction against Governor Greg Abbott's order. He said the child plaintiffs are being denied the benefits of in-person learning. He also said the state government failed to present any evidence that requiring masks fundamentally alters educational programs. Kim Davis-Rogers is one of the attorneys who sued Governor Abbott and the Texas Education Agency on behalf of Disability Rights Texas.
All of our plaintiffs have disabilities that put them at a higher risk for severe consequences from COVID, and the accommodation that provides them the most protection is the use of masks. But Governor Abbott's executive order prohibited schools from requiring the use of masks.
The judge pointed out that since in-person classes resumed this semester in Texas, more than 200,000 kids tested positive for COVID, and at least 45 school districts temporarily shut down. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton had already sued 15 school districts that openly disobeyed Abbott's order. He argued that it's a parent's decision up to schools whether their child should be forced to wear a mask. Paxton tweeted last night that he strongly disagrees with Yankel's order barring him from suing any other schools, and his office is considering all legal avenues to challenge the decision. It's expected to be swiftly appealed to the conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Again, Attorney Rogers.
But in the meantime, we have an injunction that allows school districts to implement the accommodations to protect students with disabilities.
7 other states, mostly in the South and Southwest, have stopped school districts from requiring students to don face masks. Legal fights have broken out all over. So far, 5 other federal courts, like the judge in Austin, have found that prohibiting masking in schools violates the ADA. In Florida, the state appeals court found in favor of Governor Ron DeSantis' ban on school mask mandates. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has weighed in, with the Justice Department and the Education Department supporting lawsuits challenging bans on school mask requirements. John Burnett, NPR News, Austin.
update on what happened to the unhoused people who were living in the encampment that became known as Veterans Row. It was near the West LA Veterans Affairs campus on San Vicente Boulevard. The sheriff targeted the camp for cleanup over the summer, and officials cleared it earlier this month. A spokesperson for the VA's LA regional office says 28 out of 33 unhoused veterans living there accepted services. 21 have enrolled in a VA program offering meals, medical care, and housing and employment assistance. 6 are in hotels and are working with case managers to get into permanent housing. With COVID-19 cases rising in Los Angeles County, Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer tells KPCC she believes waning immunity may be a factor, especially among vaccinated older people experiencing breakthrough infections.
They tend to also be more likely to get devastating illness when they do get infected. So waning protection is real, and people who are eligible for boosters need to get boosted.
Director Ferrer says vaccines and boosters will make a big difference in keeping cases down this winter. That's in contrast to the surge that got underway this time last year in 2020 when we did not have the shots. On this Veterans Day in Palm Springs, the city is hosting its 24th annual Veterans Parade. This year's theme is honoring all who served, and the parade is set to start at 3:30 this afternoon at Palm Canyon Drive and River Road. It is set to end at Malengo Road. Hate crimes rose in Los Angeles County last year by a startling 20%. KPCC's Josie Wong says more than 600 hate crimes were reported, the most since 2008.
County officials attribute the jump to a tumultuous year that saw protests against racial inequity, polarizing the presidential race, and also the scapegoating of Asian Americans for the spread of the coronavirus. Robin Toma leads the county's Human Relations Commission.
This was a perfect storm that wanted to focus so many phenomena and tore in our society's social fabric. It surfaced many pre-existing prejudices, intergroup tensions, and divisions.
Black residents were again overrepresented as victims. They made up 42% of racial hate targets, while comprising only 9% of the county's population. White residents made up 12% of victims, while accounting for 28% of the population. They too saw a spike in targeting, the largest of any group, in fact, 127%. In more positive news, rates of crimes motivated by religion and gender fell by double digits. I'm Josie Wong.
The LA City Council is set to vote tomorrow whether to direct city officials to create a potential reward program for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of hate crime perpetrators. The motion from Councilmember John Lee notes the LAPD last year recorded a 114% rise in hate crimes against Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Temperatures in low desert communities will be in the low 90s. Elsewhere in the coastal valley areas, it will be in the mid-80s to around 90. Thank you for listening to the LA Report. I'm Suzanne Watley. Join us again next time. Meantime, read more news at laist.com and listen live at kpcc.org.
This podcast is supported by Dignity Health Southern California Hospitals, including Glendale Memorial, St. Mary in Long Beach, Northridge Hospital, California Hospital in downtown LA, St. Bernardine, and Community Hospital of San Bernardino. Across Dignity Health hospitals and care sites, the well-being of patients is always the priority. To learn about emergency services, heart care, and healthy babies, you can visit dignityhealth.org/SoCal. Dignity Health. Hello, human kindness.
There are still more than 100 container ships stuck off the coast of Southern California. The blocked ports are just one of the factors leading to massive breakdowns in supply chains, which means American consumers aren't getting the goods they want when they want them. And even if they do, prices keep going up. In a moment, we'll hear from the executive director of the Port of Oakland in Northern California. But first, NPR's Aisha Roscoe on how President Biden is trying to convince Americans his new $1 trillion infrastructure bill is going to give consumers some relief.
President Biden kicked off his sales pitch in Baltimore talking to longshoremen at the port.
At one point, you're going to be mad at me. There'll be so much work. You say, why not? It's never enough. Never enough. Never enough. I'll be mad at me.
He's promising more jobs and busier ports.
You're going to get a lot more. I promise you. Bring it.
He says a $1 trillion infrastructure deal will make a world of difference. It will boost investments in roads, bridges, and broadband.
I'm going to create good-paying union jobs. Union. Not good job. Not $12 an hour, not $15 an hour, $45 an hour and up with good benefits. so you can raise a family on and build the middle class out.
Biden also argues that the law will help the U.S. catch up to China, a top priority for the president.
Put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We face with China and the rest of the world. China's outspending us on research and development. China is outspending how these other countries are as well.
While Biden was selling the plan, he couldn't escape some bad economic news. Inflation is surging. Consumer prices are up 6.2% from last year, the sharpest increase in 31 years.
Everything from a gallon of gas to a loaf of bread costs more, and it's worrisome.
Supplies have not been able to keep up with demand, and it's hard to run factories during a pandemic.
When you go to order a pair of sneakers or a bicycle or Christmas presents for the family, you're met with higher prices and long delays, and they say they just don't have any at all.
It's a huge political problem for Biden, but it's not clear how much he can do. Still, he's promising to work on it.
And we're tracking these issues and trying to figure out how to tackle them head on.
The rest of Biden's agenda hangs in the balance, including that $1.75 trillion plan to invest in childcare, climate, and other priorities. Already, some key lawmakers are raising concerns about government spending at this time, and elections are around the corner. So addressing inflation is another promise Biden will need to keep. Aisha Roscoe, NPR News.
Danny Wan is the executive director of the Port of Oakland and president of the California Association of Port Authorities. Danny, there's 80 ships lined up outside of LA and Long Beach. What do you see as the reason why they're backed up?
Well, there are several choke points in the supply chain. Each link in the chain is contributing to this. One, there is space in the harbors on the land side in terms of availability to store the containers once they're unloaded. Then there's shortages of truckers to move that container from the port onto the sites where the warehouses are. There's limitations of warehousing space. And then, of course, there's a rail connection that's also a choke point as well. So each link in the chain has its own problems that's contributing to the backup. Of course, the main cause is the surge in the consumers buying these goods and inability for the capacity to accommodate that.
And why is Oakland moving smoothly? Why is Oakland not in the same predicament as LA and Long Beach?
Well, early on in the surge, Oakland actually did experience a backup. The reason in Oakland, however, was that a labor shortage in the beginning that had to be ramped up in order to meet the demand. So Oakland had been able to ramp up its labor, but also partly is because Oakland is in the second stop as the ships come from Asia.
How's it going? I just need to get a COVID test there real quick.
Yeah, so it's jamming up, but once this guy comes in, I think there might be a spot up there. Somebody might be pulling out.
Behind the BMW?
Like right in here?
Yeah.
Right into this driveway. I'm not sure if there's one here. If not, you could take this one that's pulling out and then walk to the tent.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
If I were you, I'll just take this one right here because cars are going to come quick right now.
Come on. Come on, you can do it. Good job.